Welcome to the Unit Economics Podcast. I'm Josh Stavinsky.
And I'm Joe Hovde.
On today's episode, we sit down with Zach Fried, co-founder and CEO of Craighill. Craighill is a design and manufacturing company that produces beautiful, everyday objects. We hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Zach. Could you please give us a brief background on both yourself and on Craighill?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. Background on myself. So yeah, my name's Zach Fried. I am the co-founder and CEO of Craighill. My path into this business and leading this company has been sort of classically nonlinear. It is strange now thinking about the fact that I am in charge of a design company. If you had told me that when I was 18 or even honestly 28, I would have thought that was a very crazy thing to hear. So yeah, my background as a kind of young person, always grounded in creativity, but it started for me with music. I was playing in bands from the time that I was probably 13, and I did that all the way up, all through my 20s. Studied music in school, played in bands, and then ended up in bands that were doing well enough to go on tour. And so was pursuing something that in retrospect was really a manifestation of creative entrepreneurship. So how do you take creativity and turn it into a job that you like? And simultaneously, while I was doing that, I was also working in real estate. And that was a function of making ends meet and figuring out how to help people find places to live and make enough money to then go back on tour. But yeah, again, unwittingly, all of this is laying the foundation for, I think, a lot of entrepreneurial skill set and kind of autodidactic learning how to do things on the fly. And yeah, and then so simultaneously, my partner and very close friend, Hunter Craighill, he and I are originally friends from college, and he was pursuing a kind of parallel path, doing his own version of that in the more visual creative realm. And that looked like studying architecture in school, but this is in a liberal arts context. And then working for an architect, working for a graphic designer. Ultimately, he ended up getting a job at a company called Best Made, which was an outdoor lifestyle outfitter and supplier who was making really beautiful, very beautifully designed things like axes, hand-painted axes. And he really cut his teeth there, learning how to source super high-quality product from around the world, how to interface with different suppliers, and how to start developing a vision around a kind of unconventional constellation of products that had a very particular point of view and could then be built into, a distinctive brand. So that kind of lays the foundation of where did we come from? And then that just takes us to the very beginning. And really the way it happened is that Hunter had done a couple versions of this type of company before we did this one. He had a project that he worked on with his cousin called General Manufacturing Concern. And they had a handful of products, one in particular that ended up getting pulled into this brand. That was the Wilson keyring. And so that product specifically actually predates this company. And so he was doing this, and I would be off tour, and I would sometimes just want to pick up additional hourly work around the holidays. And he was like, hey, do you want to come to my kind of little studio in Williamsburg here in Brooklyn and hand stitch wallets or make jump ropes? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So it'd be it's $15 an hour. We're going to listen to a podcast, and I'm going to do some kind of actually interesting manual labor. And in the process of doing that, I had a lot of questions. I was like, what is this material? Where did it come from? Where are we shipping this to? Who's paying for it? Is this going to a store? Where do you store all this stuff? How'd you design it? And that was a function of curiosity. And that curiosity, I think, planted a seed in his mind that I was asking good questions. And so he gets the credit for having the gumption to start these things in the first place. And then he pulled me in super early, and he approached me while I was still playing in bands and doing the real estate stuff. And he was like, I want you to come join me and do this. And initially I was like, that sounds crazy. I have truly no business doing that. But it occurred to me pretty quickly how interesting the whole thing was. So he came to my birthday party. It was my 30th birthday. So it's very funny in retrospect. It's such a turning point in your life. You're I'm about to enter serious mode, or something like it. I have to start thinking a little more seriously. Came to my 30th birthday party, which was on my birthday, and he put forward this idea. He was like, I want you to come work on this with me. And I said no. But then I was like, should I do that? That sounds pretty cool. And then I remember like the next day having this thought that if it worked out, that it could plausibly last forever. And that is such a like romantic feeling. It's like when you encounter your partner like romantically, where you're like, this could be it. This could be for life. And that is a feeling that I have carried forward to this day. And I think he would say the same. I know he would say the same. So yeah, that like sets the stage for like how it started. And then from there, it's just been this incremental learning process. We really did not know how to run a business. He knew a little bit how to run a business. I knew a little bit how to run a business from having done this abandoned real estate stuff. But yeah, it's been this constant recognition of lack of knowledge and ongoing experience of imposter syndrome and just being like, what do we do now? And who do we go to? And so there's been this really powerful search for information and people. And that information can come from books, from the internet, but like mostly it comes from developing a team of just like friends and trusted advisors that we know who to go to for specialized knowledge. And we keep reaching this new threshold of our knowledge and then being like, okay, now what do we do? And it's honestly, in many ways, very uncomfortable to just feel unsure and to know increasingly for me that I have a lot of responsibility, but I had to have never done this before. So yeah, it's humbling, but it's also like humongous opportunity for learning and creating.
Incredible. So, okay, so take us back. It's your 30th birthday. You decided now to kind of take the leap. What's the first thing you end up selling, and how did it go from kind of conception to selling? Was it the product he'd worked on before with his cousin or something else?
Yeah, great question. There were maybe 8 products that were already in stock, and they had been designed and they had been manufactured. At the time, we were working, like I said, out of this little office in Williamsburg, right by McCarran Park, for anyone who's familiar with the area. And it was like, probably 15 feet by 8 feet. Like, it was a really small room. Smaller than the office that I'm currently in alone, not working with 4 other people. So the process of getting the company off the ground, because Hunter had this experience, he was like, how can we take a super small amount of money and put forward as many good products as we can with really short production runs and just chase winners, just see like kind of what sticks and reorder as frequently as possible. So we were working with domestic suppliers that he had relationships with. Many of them were producing product in like very industrial ways. And then we were having to do a lot of like hand cleanup on buffing wheels in that same room. So the buffing wheel would be running and then someone would be like on a call about something somewhat important, and there would be like literally like metal is being ground right next to that person. And so the products were the Wilson keyring. There was definitely a money clip. There was at least one, I think a couple of wooden like valet trays. There was a bottle opener. And then this wasn't like, it's funny, I did not intend to be like, okay, I'm going to show off this prop now. But this wasn't part of the original collection, but it came very soon after. And so it's the Jack puzzle, which is this guy here. And in the process of selling these products, like initially it was standing up a website and sending emails to friends and family and being like, hey, here's this new thing. And when you're launching a new company in that way, yeah, your friends and family respond. They're like, I want to support you. And also you're really talented and I have a high degree of confidence this is going to be great. But really, like, what really started it, and my first day on the job, was we went to a trade show. And that's a trade show that happens here in New York twice a year. It's like a menswear, like men's fashion trade show called Man New York. And they do man and woman. And they're originally based in Paris, but then they have shows in New York also. And so the show is in the West Village at this place called Industria Super Studio, which I don't think exists anymore. It's like a really nice creative studio for photo shoots and stuff. And we set up our little table with our 8 products, and really good stores were coming through because at the time it was like a really great it still is, but it's like things have kind of shifted in that industry, but some really great stores came through. And so, yeah, we ended up opening accounts. This is like day one. And I had no frame of reference. But so this store based in Austin, but that has multiple locations called Stag Provisions, which is like a really top tier menswear store. They instantly were like, we love it. We're placing an order. And then
For which product?
a lot of products, like
A lot of them. Okay.
all of them.
Wow.
And yeah, but at the same time, it's like, I think there's this conception when you open a retail store. I think a lot of in like D2C world, it's like, oh, we're going to now move into retail. And that means like, oh, we're going to go to Target and we're going to start doing many millions of dollars a year in revenue from truly national 6,000 door distribution or whatever. With a store like Stag, they had a couple doors. I think probably the opening order was like $3,000 or $4,000. And so for us, we're like, this is awesome. Like, this is a very clear indication that things are going well.
How many units did that amount to? Like, did you have the product in hand? Were you like, oh, wow, we need to scramble to like manufacture all this very quickly? Or were you like, oh, great, that's easy?
I'm doing some like really rough math. It was probably like a few hundred units. And I would imagine, given that we probably did not have all of the products that we needed, but we were able to get them pretty fast. So, our turnaround time at that time was probably 30 days. And so, particularly for fashion stores, when they're placing a PO, they're like, or a purchase order, they're like accustomed to waiting for long lead times for close. And so if you're like, oh, this will be 60 days, they're like, no problem. Just ship it when it's ready. Ship what you have now. Ship the rest when it's ready. But no, we definitely did not have deep inventory. And that was by design, and necessity. We just didn't have any money. So we were like 50, 100 units, whatever the best like minimum order quantity we could get was, we would do just that and then reorder frequently.
Did you view at that point, had you expected these kind of specialty retailers to be the first place you would succeed, or were you expecting the kind of email list, friends and family, and then growing that beyond to a more direct to consumer thing? Like, which of those did you have in mind as the first big growth channel?
It's such a funny question because I had no expectation. I was truly like, Hunter is really talented. I think these products are beautiful and I think they're priced well. Like, I think that they're both premium but approachable, even as a person who at that time had like no money. I could say from Hunter's perspective, based on his experience to that point, the expectation was that wholesale would be the kind of force. And I think in retrospect too, that was very wise because retailers are comfortable taking risks, but then also having the onus of selling the product themselves. And so they're happy to be like, this is an exciting new brand and we believe in the product. We can tell that story ourselves. And to a successful independent store, like to spend a few $1,000s to bring in a new brand, it's not nothing, but it's not a huge thing. And so that provided us with the cash flow to get things going. And yeah, what I've learned now about getting a D2C kind of engine moving is it is very hard if you don't have money. And so I think that, again, this all happened so incrementally that there wasn't a lot of like, this is our master plan for how we're going to make all of these components fit together. But when at this point, people come to me, like not super frequently, but somewhat frequently, to be like, what should I do to get this brand off the ground? And I'm frankly like, that sounds hard. Like, I don't know. I have like a lot of skills now from having done it, and I understand how a lot of the systems work. But yeah, building a customer base on D2C without spending tons of money to acquire customers through like Meta or Google is hard. It takes a long time.
How would you view, you said getting a DTC engine moving, and it feels to me as an outsider like the method for doing that has changed a lot over the past several years as the platforms have evolved. How does it look different now than when you kind of first started learning about it?
Yeah. So when we were first starting, this was like the era still of the blog. And so there was a way to get the word out through more kind of traditional press practices, just contacting writers who were influential, sort of tastemaker whether they're running a website or like literally have a blog, or they're like a writer for the New York Times or GQ or something along those lines. And so we had some early traction with, yeah, like with like the Times, with GQ, with like Uncrate was a big one. And that's still a huge website, but at the time, if you got them to cover you, it would drive a lot of sales. I think in retrospect, it was like, it seemed proportionally huge to me at the time. And, you know, there are still elements of that are true. Yeah, but it's not the same as it was. So that's like one thing that kind of certainly stands out, where if you could get good coverage, that would have a meaningful impact on revenue, like pretty immediately.
Whereas today it's more just having to pay the platforms to run ads, or are there kind of other things you see as would be key to starting that engine if you were to do it today?
Yeah, if I were to do it today, I would say that focus on organic content creation. That is it's a tough nut to crack, but it's also an unprecedented system that if you are able to figure out how to make something that people really respond to, you can get it in front of like literally millions of people for the cost that it takes to make the thing. I think that there's the element of paid media has its place for sure, but it depends on the goals and it depends on the budget. Like if a company is capitalized, they have lots of cash and they're like, we're trying to establish product market fit or scale, or like there's just so many different goals. Our approach has always been, I'm trying to think about the way to frame this in a way that's not like we're doing this in such a good way and everything else is like wrong. It's just been resourceful. We've just had to be resourceful because we didn't raise money and we didn't want to. And so that has informed an approach that's much more grounded in sustainability on some level for the business and profitability. And so I also think that when you tell somebody who's trying to get a brand off the ground that they need to create like world-class content, it's not super fair for a lot of people. It's so daunting. So yeah, I would also say, and this is something that we did pretty actively, it's very similar to going to trade shows, but it's going to meet people in real life. Like setting up your table at whatever little pop-up thing and setting up your products and learning what it feels like to go have those conversations and see if people are interested in buying the thing you've made. There's like real meaningful customer acquisition or like finding people through that. There's also just extremely powerful learning that you can't easily replicate online. And then I also think that it is very energizing just on a human level to be like, this is real. Like I'm taking this and I'm setting it up somewhere and I'm in my community and I'm sharing sort of vulnerably my creation with real people that I don't know. And so, yeah, when I've seen like some friends recently develop pretty early traction in terms of like getting a new brand off the ground. And it's very much been grounded in kind of tireless effort to show up and make connections in real life.
Yeah, for listeners who aren't aware, Craighill has a wealth of really incredible digital content out there. Could you just speak a bit to how that strategy evolved over time?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Also, I appreciate that. So it evolved again from a place of resourcefulness and this kind of desire to continue to expand the scope of what we were able to accomplish from a product standpoint, from a team standpoint, from a creative standpoint, like photo, video, all of it. We were substantively like, we would like to have more resources to fully realize this vision. And in order to do that, we need to figure out a way to make more money. And we had gotten like pretty good at email marketing, retention, like figuring out how to make really beautiful photographs happen, like working with creative photographers, some elements of art direction. In the very beginning, we were like okay at social media, specifically Instagram, but it always felt a little uncomfortable. It was like, how does this work? There was like mystification. Like I didn't totally understand how things gained traction. and I didn't totally understand how to create a process that was consistent. And so what that led to is kind of self-protective decision, or like lack thereof, to just kind of like shy away from it and be like, we're going to kind of like do this in an obligatory way where we post a photo now and then, but it's not a focus. I think I also learned a wise lesson, which is that to cultivate the like so-called, in marketing speak, owned and operated channels, it's like build your email list and communicate with your customers through your email list. Because if you're building your audience exclusively on Instagram, for instance, you don't own the pipes. And so that it can be throttled down, and then you can't access those people. And yeah, you see this when things change on these platforms and folks get really frustrated. So yeah, there was some kind of self-protective desire to like not have to try to compete. And then we got to this point where things were going pretty well, but it was harder to identify how to kind of get the growth to accelerate or even maintain. And I had a conversation with a person that is like a really trusted advisor, just a super smart guy. His name is Yan. Yeah, I put it to him directly. I was like, how do we accelerate our growth without spending an obscene amount of money? And he very directly was like, you figure out how to build community online by making videos. And I remember him telling me that, and I was like, that sounds impossible. Like, how am I going to do that? But yeah, I sat with it and I was like, okay, tell me more. Like, what do I do? He's like, you practice. Like, if you're going to be the person doing it, like, just set up the camera and start making a video with the intention of not posting it. Just get comfortable making a video, talk about something. And then this was really the unlock. It's so funny in retrospect, but I was like, where can I learn about this? And he's like, do you know about Colin and Samir? And I was like, no, I have no idea what Colin and Samir is. And he was like, okay, it's this YouTube channel where these two guys talk to some of the most successful YouTubers about the like mechanics. It's sort of like meta YouTube. Like, how does it all work? And so, yeah, so I wouldn't say like super deep down the rabbit hole, but I went down the rabbit hole. I started to understand how creator business works, like an individual creator whose job it is to make content. I started to understand how that works. And I started to develop this conception of pulling that philosophy into a brand. And so rather than being like, we're going to kind of try to replicate the historic playbook of like brands make ads, we're going to start to think about like, what do we look like as a creator? And so that was really a process of trial and error. Like, when we started it was all extremely well intentioned, but it took a long time to start developing traction. And I think that's a very common thing that you hear, is that like, you must get going and you must be prepared to be pretty bad at it for a while. But we were also pretty clear about this idea that like, we weren't willing or interested in doing anything that made us feel uncomfortable. Like, there's so much content in the world these days of people doing things where I'm like, they might feel comfortable doing it, but when I watch it, I feel uncomfortable. And yeah, it's like a sense of, I don't know, embarrassment, or like, yeah, a sense of what you think is cool. And I was like, I don't want us to do anything that doesn't seem cool. But then there aren't tons of examples on the internet either of things that seem like cool to me that then do extremely well in this kind of like virality way. So it was a search. And I think the first indications that like we had, and this is also things that you hear about when you're like trying to find opportunities for growth, you start testing things. Lots of folks will be like, oh, you have to be super scientific about how you run your tests. Like, I think that's kind of true, but I also think you can just try things. And then truly, when you see something that works disproportionately well against the other things at whatever level you're on, you just investigate, like, what was it? What was different about that? What were we talking about? Is there area for opportunity here to kind of iterate on what we did? Can we start to polish this? And then again, there's like, I think there's lots of like what people would call resulting, which is like, you look backwards to be like, I knew this was going to work all the time, and here's my system. But really, like, we weren't like, oh, we must develop a content format. It took us a little while to be like, oh, we have developed a content format. And so what it was ultimately for us is when Hunter, my partner, was talking about the decision making and thought process behind how the products came together. And that's like from a perspective of creativity, but also problem solving and kind of taking into account the lived experience of the person on the other side, and also really annoyance with these like little everyday problems that, that feeling of like, there's got to be a better way. That has informed so many of the products that we've made, but we had never had a really natural environment in which to share that kind of thinking that's super human. Like, you can write about that, but it doesn't feel the same as someone like that you're friends with telling you like, this has been super annoying and I'm working on a solution. And then the other person would be like, that's awesome, I want to hear about that. So it was a process of play and experimentation. I also think there was this internal sense of belief, and I will, in this particular instance, take credit and kind of somewhat delusionally, but in retrospect, I looked really smart, but being like, I know this is going to work. And the reason that I had that sense of belief is because I have the benefit of having some distance from the process of creating the products. And I'm a big admirer of the process and of the talent of the people who work here and the things that they're making. And so I just knew, I was like, what we're doing is extremely cool and interesting. And if there's a way to shine a light on how it works that is like tight and snappy, people are going to love it. And so I also had this understanding that we needed to bring, and this was again a function of trial and error. We hired a person initially who was a talented content creator, but he was really like a photographer. He did some video. He was kind of like a multi-hyphenate content creator. And he was making some pretty good videos, but like it didn't feel sufficiently kind of innate to his being of being like, I make killer videos. And so we also then worked with a freelance videographer that we still work with some. He's very talented, but he wasn't inside the company. And so he didn't have this kind of day-to-day running understanding of like what's going on. And then through those experiences, we started to develop this vision of like, there's this person out there. I know there's this person out there who's a video maker, has been doing it their whole life, has hopefully like grown up on YouTube, like just loves it and is going to be really interested in what we're doing, really cares about product. And so, yeah, we like went in search of that person and then extremely fortunately found that person. Yeah, his name's Henry.
How do you search for that person?
So funny. LinkedIn.com.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We just put together a job description of like, this is what we're looking for. And that was informed by that trial and error process of not quite knowing and then figuring it out. And yeah, it was really interesting. We got a ton of applicants, but yeah, but like as some of them were definitely talented, but it was so abundantly clear when he applied for the job. It was like almost certainly this is the person. And in retrospect too, I think it was real, like it was serendipitous and it was like a needle in a haystack situation. And yeah, he has like, it's hard to describe, but he has come into his own in a kind of crazy, really amazing way.
As you've evolved video, would you say the thing that's been most impactful has been honing in on your storytelling and kind of what you were mentioning about the content of the creators describing the problem and talking through the process? Or has it been the visuals and kind of the technical aspects that have evolved a lot, and that's been a key to all of this growth you've seen in video?
Yeah, great question. Not the best answer, but the answer is true. It's both. And I think that it has been this, it starts with story, but the story feels extremely satisfying because it's very easy to follow visually the narrative, because that narrative is then illustrated by all of this like really well put together B-roll that like shows what you're hearing about. And so Hunter can start talking about something and he's on camera and you're like, oh, this guy seems like he's like a nice, thoughtful person and he really is interested and passionate about what he's talking about. But if, have seen versions of these videos in the past where it does not then cut to the B-roll. He just kind of keeps talking about the thing and you're like, no, you've lost me. Like, I need to see the illustration of this idea. And so, yeah, without kind of like overstating it or like making it seem like something greater than it is. It is like an auteur kind of process of being like idea, visual, the like sonic component, all of these things fit together in a way that are the like manifestation of like a group of people's vision, but like from the actual perspective of like what we jokingly refer to as like designing the video. Like Henry's designing the video, and he does that really with Hunter and Kevin, but is shaped through his vision.
Something I think we're both really interested in learning more about is just the importance of the email list that you've alluded to and the idea of retention in general. How important is retention in this business, and what are some ways in which you've tried to optimize your retention?
Yeah, I could talk about this for a long time. I will say that like until we figured out the video stuff that I was just speaking to, retention was the most important thing. We think about it from a perspective of consistency coupled with some modulation. So like making sure that people feel like they're being substantively reminded of the brand's existence and different interesting angles to it, but that everything is being created in a way that is a little different so that you feel like there's a progression happening and that there's new information being revealed, new perspective, so that it doesn't get like boring. But yeah, it's been for a long time. It was something that like I like was personally doing and would write every email. And we think about how to augment, and for a long time too, like before we had figured out the video stuff, the substance of that storytelling of like who we are, what we're doing, like what is the voice of the company, and how do we set ourselves apart and like establish like a distinctive point of view. A lot of it was based in writing. And so, yeah, we would think about it from a perspective of like, is this an email that could plausibly drive revenue and bring someone to our site to buy? But also, is this an email that's going to get somebody to think or smile or just like have like a nice little moment delivered into their inbox by us so they can be like, this is beautiful. These photos look great. This is a funny, quippy little couple sentences. I'm definitely not going to buy this right now. But yeah, I like these people. And so that, yeah, is a strong connector to like, again, like very nerdy marketing speak, but it's like mental availability, right? Just getting people to continuously think about you so that when they are then in the market for the product that you're selling, that they think of you most naturally and most easily.
Are you comfortable sharing the percent of orders coming in that are from repeat purchasers?
I am comfortable sharing that. So historically, before this year, it would be like 20 to 22%. So a lot. And I like joke, but I say historically we have sold new products to the same people. And this year we've turned the corner and now we're selling the same products to new people. And that has been this very interesting development. Again, I'm going to keep repeating myself with the video and the success of the video, of being able to draw on just so many new people to show them things that we've already made. And I think there was this previous conception that we all had that you introduce a new product and it has like an immediate spike because you're showing it to these people that are already fans of the brand. A lot of people are going to buy it at the beginning, and then it's not going to like taper out and die, but it's going to reach a steady state that's like more stable, but not like explosive growth potential. And so that was the engine for the business, right? It was new product introduction coupled with an engaged email list would create predictable revenue because we could sell new products to the existing people because they'd be like, I love this brand. And for some, like anything they put out, I'm going to buy it. With this kind of new reality, and it starts with video, but it also is like we're now working with a really great retention agency. We're working more closely with like paid media folks on both Meta and Google, and so there's like just lots of growth activity happening this year. Retention, like repeat customer rate, is more in the like 13, 14, 15% range. And weirdly, for now, I'm like, that's amazing. Like, I'm totally happy with that because it's like, it's just a function of growth.
Does that change how many new products you want to bring to market? Like, do you slow down on product development because you kind of have this new pool of customers to market to? And does it change that aspect of the business?
Yeah, great question. It takes pressure off. It gives us more breathing room to be more thoughtful. I think in the past, when we needed to launch product so urgently, like we actually needed to launch product to kind of keep the lights on, that led to like not compromise, but just like a feeling of needing to launch more than we probably should have. And now we're trying to take the opportunity to develop like a much more consistent launch cadence and to give ourselves like at minimum 12 months from like initial design to launch. And some products 18, 24, like 36 months if it's really complicated. And that's something that we've like hungered for since the beginning, but it was very hard to see how that could happen. And now that these new mechanisms have kicked in, there is still like urgency to be like, yeah, let's just keep moving forward because that feels good. Like, not to say that we're like taking the foot off the gas, but yeah, I said it already. There's just more breathing room.
Can you walk us through the process of new product development all the way from ideation to we have this good physically in our hands and we're ready to then sell it to the consumer at a very high level?
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
what do each of the steps look like? Where are things being manufactured? Things like that.
Totally. So ideas can come from anywhere. Like historically, ideas have come mostly from Hunter and me. But at this point, you know, our team now is like about 15 people. And we also get like lots of suggestions from our customers. And we're just compiling those suggestions from customers. And then on a like twice a year, we just did the first one of these, but we're going to continue doing them because it was amazing. We have like a little pitch meeting where we like invite everyone on the team to be like, what are like 2 to 5 ideas that you have for products that you think that we should consider putting into development? And so then we have a pool of these ideas. That pool then gets sort of mapped on a sort of XY axis, like the 4 quadrants. And there it's about complexity, like perceived complexity. How complicated do we think this thing is going to be to make? And then impact. Like, how much of an impact do we think this product could make if it was really, really good? And so that starts to help with some sorting. And then the goal is to end up with 20 ideas. And from those 20 ideas, there's a research component. And so, like, that triggers the design team being like, we're going to start to try to prove some level of feasibility, like simple kind of market analysis, like what else is out there. Is there like a particularly cool idea for a manufacturing process or a particular detail that would be like distinctive or special in some way? Do most of the versions of this product that exist currently lack in functionality or durability or like some element of delight? And then just like, are we pumped? Like, is there a champion of someone? And usually, frankly, it has to be Hunter. Like, he has to be like, I'm super excited about this. There's a super strong correlation between Hunter being excited and the product doing well. And so, yeah, so we assess, we play, and then from those, roughly like 8 go to a next round of like, we're going to start to design this. And that design starts with sketching, exploration. We use a system called Double Diamond. And so it's like you start with the idea of like what you want, and then there's a broad exploration of what that could be. And that is like lots of sketching and exploration of like form, material, price point. Like, is this going to be super premium, whatever? And then from there, there's like a collaborative conversation process with the designers to be like, we think of these options, we should go in this direction. And so you kind of bring the diamond in tight. And then once you've kind of come to that point, you say, now basically, let's do that again. So what are all of the permutations within this kind of more narrow framing that it could be? And then you bring it back in. And yeah, that leads to lots of consideration of possibilities and solutions. Once you get to that point where there's then like a design direction that everyone's excited about, there's a lot of like iterative modeling and 3D printing. That 3D printing then starts to prove out like how something feels in the hand, if it has a very clear functional imperative, like just does it work well? And yeah, the goal at that point is to get something to a point where we can say, let's now prepare a spec sheet, like technical drawings, and share those with potential suppliers in it's called the RFQ process, which is request for quote. And so you're sending it to be like, how much would it cost to make this? We'll usually send that with a target price because we have an idea of like, okay, if this is the cost we're paying, roughly how much are we going to be able to like land it for? And then what would it need to cost retail? And then at that point, it's so funny because that's when the process really starts, because we're always kind of jokingly, but also seriously saying like having an idea and like building a cool model on the computer. Not that I can personally do it, but from what I understand, that's pretty easy. The really hard part is the development process. And also having a conception in that design process. Is this designed for manufacturing? Is it designed with a particular material and process in mind that's going to yield something of a high perceived value at the right price? And so, yeah, the development process from there is one of, like, simply put, like sample correction. You get a sample back. It's not right. Never. No matter how simple the product is, it is not right. And I think for a lot of people at that point, if you're not experienced, it could be like, I don't want to overstate it, but it could be like kind of devastating. You're like, I've been working so hard to develop this design. I think this manufacturer is capable of it, but this sucks. Like, this is not what we had in mind. And I also think that it can sometimes feel like you're with the wrong manufacturer. And of course, sometimes that's true, but often not. Often they just have not understood the assignment completely, or they don't understand your priorities. And so then it's about extremely detailed notes. And this can just be as simple as a PDF of like circling in red, circles. This is wrong. Do this, adjust this angle. Or sometimes you get the quote back and the quote's super high. And then that can trigger a conversation with the manufacturer to be like, where can we find efficiencies? Can you give us recommendations from your engineering team about how we could make this more efficient for manufacturing without compromising quality? And so, yeah, that also then necessitates, and like, it's tremendously beneficial to have really strong relationships with manufacturing partners who like understand what you're trying to achieve and can be partners. So yeah, a lot of back and forth with samples. You were asking where. Almost all of our products we manufacture in China, and we work with like a couple of key agents. And then we have some direct relationships with the suppliers. The agency relationships are really nice because they can help source for a particular type of product. They can go in search of a new factory that they can then vet, like with people on the ground and through their own network in terms of, reliability and accountability. They can also help with assembly. So if it's like a multi-component product or a multi-process product, they can source all of these different suppliers and help put it all together. And yeah, our design team is actually there right now visiting those suppliers and working on new products and like kind of overseeing some current production. But yeah, so back and forth in the development process and sample correction. At some point you get to a place where, and it depends on the product, but for a lot of products, there's a point where you have a sample that is really, really good. And that will often then trigger tooling. So you have to open up tooling. So the way that the initial sample was made was by some processes that would not be appropriate for mass production. And so then there's a pretty substantial upfront investment to create the tooling that then allows for mass production. And that's usually true for like casting, but it can be true for fixturing of something that you're going to mill. Like, there's just like lots of situations in which paying for tooling makes sense. You then go through the tooling process, and then they're making it what is called a top of production sample. And so that's like, we're going to now go through the full process and send you a sample that's actually off the production line. And then that can then trigger more sample correction where there's a need to adjust the tooling. But the goal with all of this is to get to a point where you're like, this is it. This is the golden sample. We're like ready to go. And then you can press go. Yeah. And have a high degree of confidence that there's going to be, standard, and that there's an expectation of like, this is the quality we can expect in an ongoing way. Of course, that's also never that simple because there is deviation from standard and quality control and all these other things. But so, yeah, you're like, what's the kind of simple process? And I then, of course, provided the not simple process, but that's the process.
I'm interested in the complexity versus impact axes. What would the take the wine key, for example, like where would that roughly fit on those axes?
Complex, major impact.
Complex because it's literally just moving parts, like there's lots of different things on a wine key.
Correct. And particularly when we made that product, that was like a new level of complexity. There's just a lot more to take into consideration when there are more moving parts, and also like friction fits and like cams or like bistable mechanisms, or even just like what like the scales of that product, the like body parts are cast and then affixed with other pieces of hardware. And I think like we're all extremely accustomed to interacting with products in our modern lives. Like if it's like a car or something, those are super complex products. And we had historically been like, and this is also, I credit Hunter so much with in the early days being like, no, we're not doing that. We're doing like single material, single process. How can we make something that's like unbelievably efficient to create, that has presence, that no one is going to be like, this is like a simple, like unsatisfying thing. It has the impact of something that feels complex, but is not complex. But then, of course, at some point too, you don't want to be afraid to pursue something you're interested in because of the challenge. You want to learn to step into the challenge. And that said, sometimes you tackle something that's complex that you believe has high impact and it doesn't land, right? It just doesn't connect. And so that's a risk. And so when we think about those axes, it's important to us to continue to prioritize like relatively low complexity and sometimes like even medium impact, because also these are just guesses. And some of our absolute best-selling products have been things that we didn't think that much about. And it's like, people talk, I always come to this from like a music perspective. So many of the like biggest hits that anyone's ever written is tossed off. They thought it was not even going to make it on the record. They're just like, whatever. And then everyone's like, I can't believe you wrote this. It changed my life. And so it's important to have an idea of where you think something is going to fit, but we don't know. And it's also important to like balance internal resource allocation and be like, let's intentionally make some things that are simple. We can get them done faster and they might become hits.
Yeah, the hit song analogy is such a good one. I think we have time for one more question. Where do you see Craighill 3 to 5 years from now? What's the dream state?
I'm trying to think how to answer this question because it's okay. So I'm going to speak to it from a longer time perspective. And this is going to sound kind of insane, but I'll tell you anyhow. Okay, so when we started the company, we developed very clearly, like not from the very beginning, but pretty early on, a pretty clear sense of, or not a clear sense of purpose. What are we trying to accomplish? What we're trying to accomplish is to foster understanding of the nature of the built world, like how things are made. And we want to do that by encouraging people to ask questions and develop their own curiosity, by demonstrating that level of curiosity ourselves and like informing and kind of sharing how that enthusiasm can be contagious and it can help you see the world in a different way. I always joke about like that scene in that movie Pleasantville where like everything is Technicolor. So it starts there. And then it's also informed by our values. And I think a lot of times companies like, there are definitely companies whose values are like really meaningful, but sometimes it feels like a little bit corporate and like stiff. We were able to define and kind of zero in on our values early before we like had any idea how to structure a company. We're like, this is actually just the stuff we believe in. And so ingenuity is the first one. Ingenuity is about creative problem solving and like finding solutions that are maybe overlooked or haven't been explored. Empathy is about like how we take care of each other, but all like how we think about the person on the other side, like who are we making this for and how is it going to improve their lives. And then if we find out that we've not succeeded in that mission, we listen and we're like, oh, okay, we didn't quite live up to the promise, let's continue to get better. Endurance, like, can we build things that last forever? Can we build a company that lasts forever? I said this in the beginning of the conversation, but yeah, when Hunter came to my birthday party and was like, come join me, and I had that thought, like, this could be for life, this could last for the rest of my life. We're trying to imbue that idea in the products, in the company, like in everything we possibly can. And then the final value is wonder. And wonder is, again, like infectious. It's like that idea of awe and admiration, and people always associate it with childhood. And we're just trying to hold on to that and bring that feeling to other people. And then the third element of all this stuff is you have your purpose, you have your values, and then you're like, okay, now what are we going to do to advance towards this purpose that is very complex? Like, we're going to inspire people to understand more about the nature of the built world. How do we give ourselves a platform to plausibly have the ability to reach as many people as possible with this kind of like educational mission? For the first 10 years of the company, I was like, I have no idea what our mission is. And then recently I was like, oh, our mission was just to survive. We just need to survive. And so now we've gotten to a point where we have survived. And I think at this point, often companies can become a little, not complacent, but there's this sense that, you've arrived and you can kind of let your guard down and breathe a little easily. No, wrong. I think that there's an element of that I want to embrace, but then there's an element of it that I'm like, no, we now have an opportunity to do something truly big. And what is that going to be? And so our mission now is, in the next 25 years, like by 2050, to be regarded as like one of the great American design brands. And when we think about that, we think really about like Herman Miller, and we think about Knoll. And yeah, these are iconic companies that prize quality above all else. They take really good care of their people. They're like obsessed with continuous improvement. And yeah, they define how people think about the idea of design in this country specifically. And so in the next 3 to 5 years, we start marching towards that extremely audacious, kind of crazy goal. And it will manifest in lots of different ways, but it's really like continuous improvement, incremental progress. So that's what I have to say about that.
I love that.
Incredible. Well, we are rooting for you. We can't wait to see where you are in 3 to 5 years. Thank you so much for the time, Zach. If you want to share with listeners where they can find Craighill products, please feel free to do so.
So for anyone who's curious to check out the products that I've been talking about and that we've been talking about, you can visit us at craighill.co, and that's .co.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Want to get 10% off your next order at Craighill? For a limited time, you can use code UEPOD, that's UEPOD, at checkout. Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.